Hello, everyone. Welcome to the other half, where we talk about the other half, that's us women, as they approach the start of the back half of their career. My name's Wendy Parrish, and this is the third episode of this series where I catch up with some of the fabulous women I've been lucky to cross paths with in my life to get advice and perspective on their career and how they're planning for the second half of their career. A few things before we get started. We are live, so feel free to ask questions in the comments and we'll try to get to those along the way. If you want to make sure to not miss an episode, please connect with me on LinkedIn and then you'll get notification when we've gone live. I'm so excited. Today's guest is one of my favorite people, Christine Nessen. Christine and I worked together at Kaplan University back in the day, and Christine was such a formidable coworker. She was one of the smartest, hardest working, and effective people I've ever worked with. And on top of that, she's super creative, super fun, and was always the person that organized our ladies' lunches out and kept us in touch while when we went our separate ways. And so I'm so happy to have Christine on the show. And Christine, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for that intro, Wendy. You're also one of my favorite people, and I was really, really thrilled to have you asking me to do this. Christine Nessen. I, from Arkansas, moved to New York to have a start career in banking, changed into marketing after 3 years in investment banking, working 90 to 100 hours a week. I said, great, and moved on from that. And then moved to Florida for my husband's job. So we relocated to Boca after living in New York City for a bit. Met you and worked with you and the other lovely ladies of Kaplan. And then currently I lead e-commerce for a local retailer, and I love my job. So that's a quick snapshot of my life in a few minutes.
That's awesome. Thank you for catching everybody up in the audience. We have a few questions that were pre-planned, and then we'll get to any questions that may come up.
Sounds great.
So you talked about a lot of different sort of roles that you've had. How did you go about deciding what career you wanted to pursue, what you wanted to do professionally?
So when I was in college, I switched majors about 4 times, maybe like a lot of people, maybe not like a lot of people, but ended up in the business school, graduated with a double major in finance and marketing, didn't know what path I wanted to take. So I started interviewing with both investment banks and ad agencies, about as different of a spectrum as you can imagine, and ended up thinking that I was going to accept the finance offers that I got because figured it would be easier for me to switch from finance into marketing versus marketing into finance if I were to make that choice. I just
Yes.
couldn't make up my mind which area I wanted to go into. So I that's basically what I did, and that was the investment banking job that I alluded to that I went into first. I worked at Deutsche Bank. I was a media and telecom investment banking analyst, and after 3 years of being in that program, I decided that I had a great experience, learned a lot, developed a ridiculous work ethic because it really was 90 to 100 hours a week that I worked, didn't see the light of day, and was always taking car service home. But I ended up switching over to marketing. So that's kind of why that's how I ended up into the path that I'm in today.
Okay, great. Were there certain things that sort of uh, helped you think through that move from sort of finance to marketing, or is it more just internal reflection?
Well, I think when growing up, I was a right brain and left brain person. I liked, and not that this is going to sound strange, but I was analytical. If being a child, it could be analytical, but I liked numbers, but I was also a writer. I liked to read. I liked being creative. And I think that being in finance, you were so immersed into the quant side that I was thirsting to do something that tapped my other part of my brain.
Yeah.
So because I mean, working so many hours, I really, tapped deep within to my reservoir of being analytical. Using that part of my brain that I thought, you know what, I'm good for a lifetime because that was really intense. I think that I want to go into a career where, in marketing, honestly, is very analytical now. I wanted to go into a path where I could maybe focus a bit more on the creative side, the critical thinking. Not that you didn't do that in banking, and that's what I ended up propelling me into the area that I'm in today.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. So when you look back, and sometimes I like to look back and sometimes I don't, but have you regretted anything you've done professionally? And if so, what and why?
So one of my former SVPs had some really good advice for me, and she said, "You don't make mistakes, you learn lessons, and you pick up things that you apply. So there's no, in my mind, yes, I've made mistakes, but I've learned something from those mistakes. I think one of the things that I've reflected on is I have jumped from jobs that I've been happy at and not looking to leave because of a promise of a better title or more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that without vetting the other company or culture um, well. So that is, I think, one thing that if I were to look back on my career, and I don't regret, every step has brought me to where I am today, and I don't, all the people I've met and all the experiences I've had, I'm very grateful for that. But I think if I hadn't have had big eyes towards, oh my gosh, this is a great title and more money, and jumped just solely for that. A company can look great on paper and a role can look great on paper, but in reality, it may not be a good fit for you culturally. And it doesn't mean that role or the people or the company isn't great. It's just not right for you. And that's a lesson I've had to learn along the way, is that sometimes there can be fantastic people, fantastic roles, fantastic managers, but it's not right for you at that moment in your career. So I think one of the things that I have regretted is just jumping because I've had a promise of, getting promoted or more money without really thoroughly investigating what I was jumping into.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Um, so this is a question that I've asked everyone that's been on my show, and I think it's really
Oh,
interesting to hear the responses.
okay.
To what do you attribute your professional success?
So you'll hear I mean, I'll probably have the usual answers that other people have said, which are, strong relationships, of course, supportive network. But I think one of the things that I can attribute the successes I've been grateful to have would be people taking a chance on me. When I came from small town Arkansas, I didn't have a fancy prep school. I didn't go to fancy prep school. I didn't have a fancy internship. I wasn't working at the White House as a page, like some of the resumes that I was and people I was up against. But I had hustle, and people took a chance on me. So it wasn't, wasn't born with a silver spoon. And I think out of when I was my junior year of college, actually, our school, Tulane, had something called the Career Consultant Network, and it had this book of people, alumni, with the jobs that they were in and the places they were in. And I went through that book and zeroed in on the people that lived in the area I wanted to move to and in the jobs that I was interested in, and called every single one of those people. And I think in my first few calls, I wasn't prepared, and that was a lesson learned. I was taught a lesson to be prepared when you talk to people and not waste your time. So after that, I learned pretty quickly, but I landed on a really kind alum who, liked me and sent my resume to a person in HR. And that person in HR liked me. And then the next thing I knew, I was being flown up to New York for Super Saturday for banking.
Yeah.
And if you looked at they had a lookbook that came out right before the investment banking analyst program started, and it had everyone's resumes in it, so you could flip through and see. And literally, I do not know how I got this job. I mean, I was with a class of some of the smartest, most accomplished people. They were racing regattas, and they were, literally working at the White House. And I'm from small town Arkansas, and judged a baby pageant that summer. I wasn't along, I think, in my mind, the caliber of these people I was working with, but that person saw something and took a chance on me. And that has been a theme that has echoed in my career. I've worked hard, and gotten things because of networking, but along the way, people have seen something in me and taken a chance on me and to put me in roles that maybe didn't have direct experience in. The same SVP I mentioned who gave me that advice plucked me from my current position and then had me lead 4 functions I had no direct experience with because she believed in me, and that was honestly life changing, and she's responsible for me in the path that I'm in today. But I think that's the one thing that maybe that I would point out that I've been able to attribute my success to, is that people have just taken a chance on me. And sometimes, a person's not going to look perfect on paper. and they're not checking the boxes and all of the things that you would, fantastic school, fantastic, degrees, all of that. And but I think of all the things that I could point to, that's from the very first job of my career, the main catalyst for my any success I've had.
Yeah, yeah. That's super interesting. Okay, I'm going to flip that a little bit
Okay.
because you've hired a lot of people over the years. I know a lot of
Yes.
us have at this point in our careers. Um, when you look to hire people, what's most important to you when you're considering interview candidates? And what makes for a good interview in your perspective for people that might be looking for jobs right now?
So, I think authenticity, and I'll define that as when you go into an interview, of course, people are prepared. You don't want them to be prepared, but a lot of people tend to stick to a script. And I ask a lot of behavioral questions to get a person off script so that I can really understand who they are as a person and what they're like, and if they know with great detail what they've done before. That's the biggest thing that I look for is just authenticity and a rapport. You're not going to necessarily know right away when you're meeting this person for the first time if you're going to be good friends, good colleagues, what have you with this person, but you can get a sense, if a person is authentic. And what makes a good interviewee is so if a person has a resume in front of you, they have certain things, bolded and bullets that they want you to ask them about because they're their most, their proudest achievements, the things that they have a script for. So what I tend to do is zero in on that little bullet, the sixth bullet on their first job or second job, and ask them about that question. And they'll, and I think that'll give me a sense for whether or not they truly have a grasp of what they did, or if they did the work, and that, then if they can think off the cuff, because I've taken them off of their scripts. They have the two first bullets that are bolded with the stats and the $9 million in revenue that they've driven, but I don't ask them about that at all. So I think, to answer your question, that's what I look for in a good interviewee, is someone who is articulate and well versed through any tiny piece of information on their resume and
Yeah.
can talk fluently about that. And that their authenticity and the way they come across and answering those questions that they may consider obscure or what I think would make a good
Okay.
interviewee.
That's great. That's great feedback. Know your resume.
Know your
Um,
resume.
and be authentic. So, Margaret, who I interviewed at the last show, hi, Margaret. Thank you so much for listening in. She has a question for you.
Okay.
She wants to know how hard the transition for you from New York to Boca has been for someone with a full time job with not a ton of time to make friends.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Margaret. That is a wonderful question. And if you are in my circle of friends, you know how hard it was for me. And I will say I loved New York. Loved the friends I had, the job I had. I'd worked at American Express was the last job I had, and it was a fantastic role. And tried to stay with that company when I first moved to Florida. And we moved for my husband's job, so he got the job of a lifetime, and I was more flexible in my career. So we basically cast a wide net and ended up in Boca. And it was really, really hard. I would say for the first 5 years, I was in my own little like cave. And it was of my own doing, So to answer your question, I think it was difficult only because I'd made it difficult for myself. I wasn't as open to making friends, and I was flying up to New York like every other month to go see my friends. And as the joke goes, with my friends to get my hair cut. Finally found a hairstylist, by the way, in Florida this past month, or a couple of months ago. So it just took a while to do that, but it was hard, and it was because I wasn't open to doing that. But I think, Wendy, I credit you and the other ladies at Kaplan. That was my job that I found when I first moved to Florida, and that was the beginning of me thinking, okay, I could set roots here. I could meet smart, funny, diverse people here, just like I had in New York, and that's possible. I can open my mind to that. So, but it was hard. I just basically, for the first 2 weeks when I moved here, I was sitting in the dark watching Casino Royale because we didn't have cable on DVD again and again and again, and having a pity party. But it's, now it's a switch. I'm like, oh my God, I love it here. I can't imagine, living anywhere else but Arkansas, my hometown maybe. But it was hard, Margaret. So thank you for asking. Now I love it, but I did not. I really did
Yeah.
not.
Okay, so speaking of that, I wanted to share something because if you've watched the show before, you know I do this. I found this. Hold on.
Oh
Oh,
no. The pictures.
yes. From what
Oh
our
my
last
God.
lunch. It was so long ago. I'm sure Christine's.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
not Christine. I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm having a total name blank. This is fair. Nicole's son is
Mason.
probably now 10, but
Yeah, he's a walking, talking human.
well, that's
Oh
awesome.
my God.
Um, okay, so another question.
Yes.
So, one thing that's really changed, I feel like, since we first started working is technology.
Yes.
And it continues to change really quickly. I'm working at a technology startup right now, and I'm always just amazed by the things that our engineering team talks about. But do you have any favorite technical tools that you find valuable professionally that like help you?
Yes. So my role is very technically focused, technically and analytically focused. And we, so to answer your question, the tools that I find professionally useful, and even if you're not in my line of work, web analytics platforms like Google Analytics, I'm becoming well versed in that. So I use Google Analytics. I like to self-service my own data quite a bit to pull reports.
Yeah.
So being conversant in Cognos and Tableau so that you can pull the reports. Took a SQL training, 2-day training at my last job with my team. Can't write a SQL query to save my life, but if you can, that's also helpful to be able to pull your own data if your company has a data warehouse. And then other than that, collaboration tools, so other than your typical analytics platforms, collaboration tools like we use Slack right now,
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, I've used Hangouts, Teams, WebEx. And then for customer segmentation in marketing, I've used DMPs, data management platforms, and CDPs, customer data platforms as well to pull customer segments from to build campaigns.
Yeah.
But those are a snapshot from analytics on down to reporting to customer segmentation and then collaboration tools that I've used. And then the other couple of things I think to make things interesting for business reviews and for engagement with your teams, use a lot of Google Forms. I poll the team a lot and then use Kahoot. So we've been introducing Kahoot in our monthly business reviews as well, just to make things more interactive and engaging for folks listening to you talk about boring numbers.
Okay,
So
that's hilarious because my son is in sixth grade. He loves
uses
Cahoots, and
Kahoot.
my sister is a professor at EKU, and she uses Cahoots. So I hadn't thought about using Cahoots in the business world, but yeah, it'd be fun.
I know. I didn't know that it was used so much in the education world because I did a Google search, found it, and then started using it. And someone said, "Oh, my peer said my wife is a teacher and she uses Kahoot for like her fifth graders." And I was like, "Oh, well, I hope that my team will like this then." But it's been a lot of fun. I encourage anyone to check it out. It's free. There's a level that's free, and
Yeah,
it makes things a lot of fun.
yeah, good. Well, everybody needs more fun.
Yes.
Um, Okay, so you talk a little bit about taking an SQL class, and I do
Yes.
feel like data and analytics is particularly important in marketing, but in general, I think it's important when you're trying to grow a business if you're in, a business type role. Um, do you have any advice on sort of improving your analytical skills, or because it is something we probably didn't need as much when we first graduated?
Absolutely. Analytics is pretty critical for anyone in most roles and functions in the professional world, specifically and especially in marketing and e-commerce. So what my advice would be is if your company has a platform that you use for any type of analytics, I mentioned a few just now, Google Analytics, there's Adobe Omniture for web analytics, Tableau, Cognos, whatever that might be, ask the team who controls access and get access to it and then poke around and then ask the teams to give you a crash course in it. So a lot of teams that they're not overburdened will be more than happy to sit down with you and tell you how to pull reports or kind of work your way through it. But honestly, the thing that I found to be the most useful is going in and poking around,
Mm-hmm.
number one. And number two would be asking the teams or a subject matter expert who has expertise in that platform to give you a crash course. Case in point, on the data management platform I mentioned, Nielsen Marketing Cloud, I asked a person on the paid team if she could give me a crash course. So for 45 minutes, she walked me through how to pull basic segmentation in it. And that was just me asking, a fellow colleague to do that. So those two things, honestly, get access to platforms to poke around. Number two is ask a subject matter expert or analytics team or whomever to show you how to use the items in it. But I want to differentiate pulling the reports from gleaning insights is a very different thing. So
Yeah.
the one part of it is understanding how to pull the data and using the platforms. The other part of it is to glean insights. Um, the gleaning insights, ask a lot of questions. I know that's a pat answer, but when in one of my former positions, there are many people who can go out there and memorize hundreds of numbers. I am not one of those people. I can retain some things, but I'm not, I can't spit back at you, the revenue that we had in Q2 of 2018, like some people can. So what I used to do is understand and talk to my manager and my teammates. What are the main KPIs that I really need to be tracking? If sometimes in this particular job that I'm in, I have KPIs that are assigned to me, but other jobs you may not. So what I'll do is I'll ask and make sure, what are the KPIs I need or metrics I need to make sure that I'm well versed on. And then I used to have a post-it note that I would keep on the inside of my notebook with the main KPIs,
Yeah.
and I would update that. So I would look at that and say, okay, what are the sales and impressions and click-through rate and et cetera like, and make sure that I looked at that on a daily basis, and then I retained that. So, and then once you retain that and understand your KPIs, is understanding when you look at reports what you should be looking at and what you should extract from it, and then how you could action upon it. That
Yeah.
comes from learned experience. It's not, some people have a natural affinity for gleaning insights from data, but one is just to simply understand what metrics you should be looking at. You can have a post-it note like I can, or have something sophisticated like Trello, or whatever
Yeah.
that may be, to help you retain. And then ask a lot of questions, and then listen in meetings to see what people zero in on and ask questions about, and we'll pick apart. And I think that is the way that, or the advice that I would give for people on making sure that you have um, improved or focused on your analytical skills. So
Yeah.
that's my
Okay.
general advice.
No, that's helpful. I think that's super, super helpful. So you have a daughter, and so I'm just curious, did your work style change at all after you had her?
It did, so I think you alluded to at the very beginning. I've always worked pretty hard. I still work hard today. But one thing that I have done since having my daughter is setting boundaries and not feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So I hold a lot of guilt. I'm Catholic, and all this. So anyway, so I have a lot of like, I could walk around with a lot of guilt. And the thing that I've learned is to not apologize, because that's one of the things you don't, as a leader, you want to set an example that this is normal, and it's okay if you have a doctor's appointment you need to run to take your children to, or even if you don't have kids, just taking care of yourself was a big thing that having my daughter taught me. And so in a former job, I would leave every day at 5 so that I could pick her up from school, because the school closed at 5:30.
Yeah.
Didn't have to apologize, just left to do it, and sometimes I may have to log on at night and get my work done. That's fine. But I don't log on, for dinner time. I don't log on and check work for bedtime routine or weekend activities. I will get my work done and work late on the weekends, whatever that may be. But my family time is my family time, and I do not apologize for that. So that is how things have changed. Is in the past, I'd be super guilty, like working in banking, you'd apologize. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm leaving at 8. I'm coming back. You'd make sure that people knew that you were coming back. And I think over time, you just don't, it's life. You know what I mean? Like, whether you have children or not, things that you need to do
Yeah.
for yourself, for your kids, for, whatever that might be. And just as long as you do the work and do it well, you don't have to apologize for it. So I think that's what having a child taught me. And it's also, work-life balance is really hard. Like,
Yeah.
so you just can't, I think I admire the people who say, like, I've done it, I can balance it all. But honestly, at midnight last night, I forgot to move our elf. And so I had to figure out what to do with this elf. And I hope she's not listening to me right now, because it's real and it's magical. But
Didn't
there's
touch
just,
it.
You didn't touch it. I didn't touch it. But that's the other thing as well. You have to cut yourself some slack. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I almost did move the elf last night. You know. But as long as you can laugh and get your work done and not take yourself seriously, which I don't obviously take myself seriously, then you can balance things and find a way, to be fine, at things, at
Yeah.
work and being a mother and being a friend and all of that. You just can't be perfect. You just have to get yourself some slack. So
Yeah. 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 That's great advice. It's hard to try to be perfect.
it is.
Um, what would you say is your number one sort of productivity tool or tip?
So the one thing that two things actually that I would say are my productivity tools or tips would be one is physically block your calendar for things. My current job is really great at conditioning and training us to do that. You don't block your calendar, you might not do it. You might not eat. You
Yeah.
might not get your industry reading done. You might not be able to work. So I actually have work blocks on my calendar, which oftentimes get booked over for meetings. I mean, it
Yeah.
happens. But I'll block 8:30 to 9, to get some reading done. I'll block time to eat. May not get to do that at all or like at 4 o'clock, but I'll try to do that. The
Yeah.
second thing that I would advise to do for productivity is to not multitask so much. So what I mean by that specifically is I tend to be responsive, so if someone slacks me or emails me, I want to respond right away. And so
Yeah.
what ends up happening is there's not continuity. I will be working and then move away to answer 10 slacks and then answer my emails and answer my texts. And then what ends up happening is I do a fraction of the work that I intended to do during my blocked out time. So a recent training I was in just taught me you may think you're being productive, you're actually not. So you just be laser focused
Yeah.
and just block everything out. And a person will survive if you do not respond to their Slack unless it's your boss. Like respond right away. But we'll survive if you don't respond within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So case in point, this past Monday I had no meetings and just worked. I
Yeah.
didn't respond to things, and it was amazing how productive I was. So those are the two pieces of advice would be block physical time, even for eating, and second would be to try not to multitask. Focus on the task at hand. It's really really hard to do because I'm a person who just I just tend to do a lot of different things all at once, but you end up not being as productive as a
Yeah.
result.
Yeah. That's great advice. That's great advice. Um, so this question is sort of an interesting one, I think. Did you ever think about stopping working for a little bit? Or have you ever sort of taken a break from work? And if you, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well,
You're
no,
just thinking about it
I'd
like,
said on a previous show that like when I first got out of college, I felt like my job was a sprint and I was running at it like a sprinter. And now I realize it's kind of a marathon. And so I just was curious, there's some companies like I think Microsoft and that they give you like a sabbatical for like 3 months after you've been there so long. And I think the other people, they just need to take a break to recharge. But then there's just like, oh no, I need to keep working. So I was just curious if you've ever thought about taking a break from working for a while, and if you did ever do that, and if you did do that, what you learned from the experience.
so actually, yes. The answer is at the start of the pandemic, when schools were closed, and I had to homeschool my daughter, who is now 5, but she was 4 at the time, for 3 months. Um, as the first week, I think I cried, like for the first few days. I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, this is impossible. I had, 10 meetings a day. And as a 4-year-old, she can't do a lot of things herself. She needs guidance, and I was
Yeah.
trying to balance that. And that was just impossible. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to happen for the next year. I don't know if I can do this, but ended up organizing myself, a bunch of workbooks, had a schedule, and ended up loving it. So ended up loving homeschooling her. I called it School of Mama. And we'd get up, we'd have a routine, we had like a set thing, and she was great, and I loved doing it. And I understand why people homeschool. It was fun. I liked it. So I thought maybe I could do this. I could quit my job and homeschool her. My husband was like, no. He was very supportive, but he's like, I don't know. But the reason I was thinking that is because, and I know a lot of probably moms and other people think of this as well, as, what if you have these moments when you transition between jobs, and I haven't had really much time with between jobs, but I know people who have resigned from a job and then gone traveling for months,
Yeah.
or taken that sabbatical, whether forced or not, and I haven't had that. And I thought, well, this would be great because I could enjoy the things that I haven't had a chance to do. So maybe it's not traveling to Petra, but it might be just enjoying my daughter. You know what I mean? And that's like
Yeah.
just as fantastic. But I think ultimately I love working and I like interacting with people. And my daughter is a person, yes, but I like interacting with smart people and people who push you, and that makes you better. And I thrive off of that. With the good and the bad situations that come at work, come from work. And then I think that's what made me realize I'm not ready, at any point in time yet. I'm a far, long way off from thinking, I think, again, that I would want to stop working. But I did have that moment at the beginning of the pandemic where I thought, I could do this.
Yeah.
But then I think, I think what pulls me back is of interacting with people. I like doing things. I like building stuff. I like coaching people. So maybe one day in the far future, but right now my thought is no. Kind of I like being in the working world, and unless I win the lottery, which then yes, I will absolutely not work anymore. Like, because who would? But for now, I think that was my fleeting thought, and I'm, firmly, happily ensconced in the professional world.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Okay, one last question, and then we'll see if we have any other questions from the audience. What would you like to accomplish before you retire?
So, the theme throughout my career, I've worked until most recently for multinational, multi-billion dollar companies, like large enterprise organizations. And in recent years, I tried to make a move to work at smaller companies, and I couldn't. It was really challenging to make that move because I was pigeonholed as this big company person. That folks couldn't see me as not needing big teams and large budgets and a lot of resources when I assured them, trust me, big companies have messes inside of them, and you don't have sometimes budgets and teams that it's not as well oiled as you think. And right now I'm working for the smallest company I've ever worked for, and it's not even that small. So what I would love to do eventually is I think maybe try my hand at a startup,
Mm-hmm.
work for a smaller company. And I've been making that deliberate move towards smaller and smaller and smaller so that I'm not pigeonholed as an enterprise person.
Yeah.
So that would be one of two things I would love to do, is to lend my hand and see if I could help, in a startup capacity. And the second thing would be, my childhood friends know this, but I've always harbored a desire to write a book.
Oh.
Um, and I have had a million ideas and stops and starts with, things ranging from, humor to a children's book series was the latest thing, the idea that I had. But one day,
Yeah.
self-publishing makes it easy for people to do that now. I would love to be able to do that
That's super
sometime
cool.
in the future. I
That would
mean,
be.
I mean, maybe you would read the book, and maybe it might
I'll
be
read
a
the
win-win.
book for sure. My son would read. My son loves books too, so he would.
Fantastic. So David and Wendy would
Two
read my book,
sales
but
at
two
the
sales.
minimum. No, I think
But
that'd
I
be
think
great.
those are two of my many dreams on my bucket list. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, good. Well, I don't see any other questions in the broadcast. Um, are you okay with people connecting with you on LinkedIn or?
Yes, I am. The caveat is that my LinkedIn profile is terrible. I do not update it ever, and it has no accomplishments or anything of noteworthiness. So don't judge me by my LinkedIn. I've been lucky enough to not rely on that profile to have opportunities and positions. But yes, people are welcome to reach out via
Okay.
LinkedIn.
Thank you, Christine, so much for coming on the show. I've learned a lot of very cool tips and tricks, and it was so fun to reconnect. It's been a while since we've talked. So, and everybody in the audience, I hope you have a happy holiday.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a happy
Same.
holidays as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.